Hi, I'm Rob Neivert. I'll be the moderator, and I've got some great experts with us today. Please do remember we have Slido, so feel free to ask questions. I will try to get to them towards the end. But we're going to talk about specialized investing, sort of infrastructure and other areas. So you've just learned about blockchain. That's certainly one of them. But we have some other areas as well in both healthcare and robotics and many other great areas. So what I'd like is if each of you would introduce yourself and a little bit about what you invest in.
Is this thing on? Okay, cool. Hey, my name is Ben Einstein. I'm the founding general partner of a venture firm called Bolt, and we focus on pre-seed and seed early stage hardware companies. We use this phrase intersection of hardware and software. Many of the companies actually have software business models, even though they might be involved in building some physical product, and we spend a lot of time and energy helping the companies go through the somewhat unique and difficult challenge of building the hardware from scratch, so all the sort of product development components that go into product design and manufacturing, et cetera.
Hardware and software blended together. All right, shh, it's a secret, it does well.
Hi everyone, I'm Renata Quintini. Some of you may have seen me this morning. I still invest in the Rebels of Science. It hasn't changed since this morning. I'm a partner at Lux Capital, and we really are looking for deep science, deep technology companies that are leveraging key innovations across many verticals. So we do invest in life sciences companies. And also a big area of focus for us is automation, manufacturing, and others. Areas that I'm personally really interested in are what we call intelligent machines. Really, how can we sense new things, actuate those sensors, and get things to do tasks for humans. And I'm also really interested in how can we use technology to help us live better, not just longer. So spending a lot of time in sort of food ecosystem, aging, fertility, and other areas as well.
So between the two of you, you could replace me.
Augment you. Augment you.
Well, maybe that's easier than I thought. I might be able to very easily replace. So, thank you so much for joining us the second time today.
That's
it's
right.
great to have you.
Well, I don't want to replace you. I just want to make you healthier. So my name is Ulili Onovakpuri. I'm a partner at Capor Capital, a social impact venture capital firm based in Oakland, California. And how we define our impact at Capor is investing in early stage companies that close gaps of access and or opportunity for low income individuals and communities of color. I focus on our healthcare investing, so it's looking at disease states that disproportionately affect communities of color as well as low-income individuals, and specifically I'm interested in maternal health, senior care, as well as like asthma, other things that are big healthcare problems and not problems affecting what the group we call the worried well, those who are at 99% and who are drinking their Soylent to get to 100%.
I haven't had Soylent in over 2 years. Does that? So I'm out of the category now.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sudip Chakrabarti. I'm a partner at Madrona. So we're an early-stage venture firm based in Seattle, but we invest up and down the West Coast. The firm started about 23 years ago with a Series A check for Amazon. That worked out pretty well.
I was about to say, that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. And then more recently, companies like Redfin, Smartsheet, Rover, Aptio, these are all our companies. So we usually come in at Series A, sometimes seed, and in some exceptional cases, Series B. We are on our 7th fund. All our funds have been $300 million each. So I focus on enterprise software, and within enterprise, the way I view the world is apps, applications, platforms, and infrastructure. So I'm more focused on platforms and infrastructure. So a lot of time spent on open source, universities spin-outs, technical founders, those kind of things.
Awesome. That's a great first check, though, huh? Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, all of you. You're obviously tremendous experts in your area. So now I'm going to ask you to divulge a secret. What is the secret to you succeeding? What's the skill or abilities you have that allows you to win in your particular area? So is it that you're PhDs in your area? Do you have access to capital? Are you well connected to government? What are the secrets for someone in your specialty succeeding as a VC?
I would argue it's empathy, actually.
Empathy.
I think every one of these areas, I'm sure, have different qualities, and the path is always a little bit different. And I think being able to empathize with founders about what it's like to have to deal with your failed product design and have to redo manufacturing, in my case, is a thing that comes across as extremely useful. And being
And do you
able to
think
work
that
with these
that's
vendors.
bigger in hardware because it's like a longer cycle, harder to build it, more
Yeah,
failure?
I think every area has its own components of things that are challenging, and I think founders really respond well to people that have actually been in those shoes, or at least in maybe one of the two shoes that they're wearing, to be able to sort of help them go through that journey as best as possible. So I think it's a powerful tool.
Yeah. So my 4 failures make me a good qualifier. All right, good.
I think passion and positivity, right? I think for founders that are trying to really create the future and bend the laws of what's possible, to find someone who believes and believes strongly and it's willing to really join the path is really meaningful.
Because you've got a long cycle, right? If I remember right, a lot of yours have longer cycles to get to market.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very draining on people, right? It's really hard to go a couple of years without actually shipping a product sometimes.
Yeah, but they know they're going to get there.
Yeah.
Right, and the last thing you need is someone who just doesn't understand or see what you see, right? Like most of the founders we back are missionaries, so.
Awesome. How about you?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So one, it's just the ability to geek out on healthcare all the time. Like, stop me in the hallway. I will talk healthcare to you any time of night.
Are you going to make me eat kale?
Yes, it's a superfood. You should definitely eat it. But with
Not inviting you to my next dinner party.
I was going to say with vitamin C, so you can actually absorb the nutrients from.
Ooh, take it to the next level there. Thank you. All right.
It's an experts panel. So I
At
gotta
the
tell
very
you.
least, I learned how to eat right.
Exactly. But also, I think the companies we're investing in are needs to have and not nice to have. So it's people who believe healthcare is a human right. So we're on the fan club of Save the ACA. Everyone should have access to healthcare, not just because that would be more consumers for their product, but that would just mean overall a healthier population and a more productive population. So we feel like we're in the struggle literally to save lives together. And so for us, it's not just another shirt or another date. It's like another human that you're saving.
That's awesome. So it sounds also like a bit of biology is quite useful in your field.
Yeah, well, that's what people mistake often sometimes.
Oh.
So we don't do biopharma investments. It's just way too expensive for our blood. We don't have money like that at KPOR. But we do digital health and med device, which allows your smaller techs to go further, and the development cycles you see just results a lot faster.
Okay. So digital health. Awesome. Thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'll say two things. First of all, credibility, which is really important. I mean, I typically invest in companies when there are like 2 engineers and their dog. That's about it. And these are usually rock star engineers.
So dogs are required for the investment?
Dog is usually required, yeah.
Definitely a dog person. Okay.
But these are like pretty rock star engineers coming out of big companies or just the open source community or universities. So if you do not earn respect from them, credibility from them, it's very hard to make them work with you. Okay. You have to be in their shoes. You have to kind of convince them that you get what they are doing. You don't have to write the code probably, which I do, by the way, sometimes, but you need to earn that credibility. I think the other thing I would just say is knowledge of history is super important.
Interesting. Why knowledge of history?
Because a lot of things that I see, we see collectively, particularly in my world, those ideas have been tried before in many cases. And 10 years back, there was probably another, kind of iPhone. I mean, think about mom, right?
Conceptually, the needs were met in a different way in the
Yeah.
past, and
So-
what succeeded and what failed helps current decision.
Absolutely. So that's why I think knowledge of history is super important, and that's why why now is super important to understand why this is the time.
So my bad grades in history might come back to haunt me.
It might,
All right.
yes.
Okay. Well, I'll keep that one in mind. Thank you so much. I'm going to change it to a little bit different. So, what's changing in the last few years? So all of you have been at this for a little while. So if you imagine an investor out here in the crowd and they've maybe doing something similar to in the past, what's changed that they said, oh, you should watch out for this? Is it bigger money? I mean, obviously SoftBank, you have these bigger funds coming in. Does it take higher skill? Are you moving everything to Grand Cayman? I mean, don't look at me like that. All my bank account, I don't have any Cayman accounts I'm admitting to.
You're a bad influence.
But I eat kale with vitamin C, so I'm going to live a long time. So, okay. Go ahead, please.
No, so I think I am so happy for Theranos. I feel like what it did was teach investors that not everyone can invest in healthcare.
So you didn't invest in it, I think.
I didn't.
'Cause
I mean,
otherwise you wouldn't be so happy.
No, exactly. Because I'm not a biology major. I went to school with a lot of them at Berkeley, and I think a lot of people like saw this company. It had this $1 billion valuation. They were hopping on it like it was, the next train to Vegas. And that's why a lot of people lost their money, because they didn't know what they were doing. And so I don't want to say like I feel bad. I do feel bad for them, but I also feel like it was a good lesson learned.
Schadenfreude, the German word, you feel that feeling bad when something bad happens to someone, you feel good about it.
What is that word?
The German word is Schadenfreude. Thank you.
I need to learn that. That's
you go.
Theranos. Theranos equals that.
But it is a tale, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to get into a specialty if you don't have any knowledge in the area. It's very risky. Theranos is obviously a really good example of that. Do you have a similar one that you want to share?
I feel like hype cycles are a really interesting dynamic that, at least as a relatively new investor, are sort of fun and interesting and complicated to master. I feel like hardware had this period when we were kind of getting going of like everybody's going to a Kickstarter thing and all these, democratizing, manufacturing.
I never did get that cooler.
Yeah. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, I think a lot of that stuff is actually detractive from the really good work that's going on in those spaces. This is probably true for a lot of areas. And so I actually feel great about the hype cycle kind of coming down a little bit. I feel like the people who are really authentic and really believe what they're doing and whose problems, at least in my opinion, are more significant and more interesting are sort of left standing. And I actually view that as a positive for investors. I think one of the issues of, I don't know what the most popular thing is now, but maybe cryptocurrency is one of the things that's sort of at the peak of the hype cycle. Is it's hard to tell when people are like really authentically into an area and have really something interesting to add.
When it looks like easy money, it attracts a lot of easy money.
Exactly, and it's hard. It's actually a difficult discipline, at least again for me, speaking from my own experience, to be able to tell those different types of people and sort of how they're operating and what they're really driving towards. So I find it helpful to have the sort of peak come down a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for successful companies oftentimes get built in recession.
Yeah, for sure.
They get when things are scarce. And we talked about that on the blockchain track as well, right? Scarcity is creativity, which drives a lot, and also creates efficiency.
It drives out noisy competitors.
Yeah, a lot of noisy competitors who really shouldn't have been there, and they're just chasing the money.
Yeah, but something positive Lux has been investing in frontier technologies since 2000, and it's been a wave of metamaterials and going into many segments until today we have things like fully autonomous cars and small satellites and sail drones, et cetera, and today those things are sexy and a lot of investors understand. But the cool thing that we've seen change for the better is talent really wants to join and work at these companies, and talent at the high level. I think people are a lot more mission-driven, and not only the recruiting for younger levels, but even joining as co-founders. Like people are looking for interesting, purposeful things to do, and I think that has changed to the positive.
I mean, I'll add one thing in my world, which is mostly platforms and infrastructure. We actually have what I would call renewed respect for big companies. And I'm specifically talking about Amazon.
Please do tell more about that one. I'm interested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about Amazon and Azure, and then, Google coming behind. But, what used to be like, startups pointing at legacy companies and saying, hey, they are sloppy, they are slow.
Dinosaurs. Refer to them as dinosaurs.
And we can take them out. I don't think that it is as easy because those guys are innovating so quickly. The other thing is kind of just the power they have. I mean, if you're a cloud provider of Amazon scale, like you can take out a lot of the other businesses.
Oh, yeah. The old Microsoft, right, where they used to take people out by just the threat of producing the product.
So I think, like in my world, I'm always constantly spending time on figuring out what is it that you really have in terms of a moat that the other big guys cannot, come and
defendable moat.
Defendable moat, and how do you not only sustain that, how do you actually build that more, like increase that moat more? I think it's really important in my world.
Yeah, it is an interesting note that a lot of the new age companies, the Googles stuff, they're actually innovating a lot more rapidly than the older titans, the GEs of this world, because they grew up killing somebody else off very rapidly, and so they themselves have a higher innovation curve.
And then just to make one other point, I think another big change in my world is open source, which is like, did exist probably in its current form like 10 years ago, but now you have, really like, you might come up with a closed source product, and if there's a more open source interesting product, like we are investors in a company called Heptio, which is a Kubernetes company. I mean, look at just the momentum of the open source project. Like if you want to go and build a closed source company in that space today, you probably have no chance.
So how do you invest in open source? How do you invest in an open source where they're giving away the code? I mean, anybody can download the code. It's like blockchain, right? I can just download the code. So how do you be a successful investor in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a much longer conversation for sure, because that's kind of the world I live in, and a lot of our
Confident you can
companies.
give us an awesome line.
Yeah, a lot of our companies. Look, at the end of the day, it's about, open source is, first of all, it's a fine dance, right? I mean, you want to put out enough in open source so that an individual developer or an individual engineer looks like a hero to his or her team. But you want to hold back everything that makes his or her team productive. So essentially what I'm saying is, you might want to put out enough that that person can deliver on his job. But if the moment they want to use that tool at a team level, they have to come and pay you.
So you sort of give away the base code, but you hold on to all the analytics tools and the things
security,
and all the rest.
So
and then
that's
you
one
sell that
model.
as a follow-on.
Yeah,
okay.
that's one model. The other model is like you host it.
Sort of a freemium-ish model, right? You give away the low end and sell the upper features.
But then the other model is you host it. Look at GitHub, look at Databricks, this companies.
Okay, yeah, GitHub, of course, great example. All right, let's switch topics a little bit. I want you to try to pitch me your sector. Why should I invest in open source versus everybody else? Why should I invest in healthcare versus everybody else? What is it about your sector that makes it awesome versus anybody else? Who wants to try that one first?
And I'll just say that I would rather not pitch it. I don't want for other people to I'm fine doing what I do.
Okay, it's an LP meeting. Now now tell me about it.
All right, thank you. Look, I mean, particularly specifically about open source, right? That's where the world is headed. I mean, today, if you are a back-carrying, suit-wearing salesman going into a modern company trying to sell a piece of software, you probably have no chance beyond HR and maybe security. So if you're trying to sell to a CIO or engineers or anything like that, or VP of engineering, the sales model has flipped. You basically have to go and get the developers on board first. And open source is the way.
So it's bottom-up sales.
Bottom-up sale.
And the open source community has facilitated that. Right?
Facilitates that, and then eventually what you do is you understand why people are using it, how people are using it, so that you can go and build the product. And when you have the product, it's like selling Bible to the converted, right? It's like they're already using the tool. You just are, selling a better version of it.
Okay, so open source. I'm sold. Who wants to take the next crack?
Well, so I'll take a crack at intelligent machines, especially when it comes to manufacturing automation. I don't think anyone disagrees with just the size and value of the industry and the fact that processes are incredibly antiquated. I think the big change right now is really the sensor evolution and how you can actually make essentially machines perform biological functions of human beings, right? They can see, they can hear, they can have depth, and they can actually have some sort of processing and intelligence based on context that allows them to be a lot more effective and more consistent in things that humans just shouldn't be doing. So when you apply that capability into industries that really move the world and the way things are done and built, that's undeniable. Right. Yeah. I think it's more a question of, is technology there? And we think it is.
Yeah. So it's much more than just the burrito machine, right? Now we're talking a really sophisticated assembly.
Yeah, it's not just a cooler that plays music.
Yeah, aw. But that was my favorite project that I never received anything for. How about...
Hardware's easy. We've been, humans have been using hardware products for, tens of thousands of years easily. I think that hasn't changed and won't change in the future. I think the big shift is that hardware business models are traditionally pretty bad for private investors, mainly due to the mechanics around commoditization. And so over time...
The ability for someone to quickly knock it off?
Yeah, knock it off and outmaneuver you, and someone with a better supply chain and better XYZ can just sort of outcompete you, which I think happens if you don't have certain types of relationships.
That defensible moat he was referencing.
Yeah, exactly, and that moat can come in any number of ways. The biggest change in that in the last decade or so has been sort of software as a layer on top of hardware. Many of these companies and products, at least that we get excited about, are really, again, as I sort of said in the beginning, are really software companies that just happen to be kind of wrapped in plastic.
You're stealthily selling me hardware, aren't you?
But it's sort of a fundamental thing that we all know and love. I actually, as a consumer, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I will really carefully scrutinize, man, $9 a month for Spotify, is that really worth it? I think about it all the time, and then I'll just go to Amazon and spend ridiculous amounts of money without even thinking about it on things that I really don't need. And I think it's just we have this wiring to appreciate physical objects more than digital ones.
Yeah, interesting. So for you, it's the $1,000 phone. You don't blink twice, but the $9 Spotify, you think carefully.
$1,000 iPhone, I thought about it a little bit more, but I'm a pretty cheap guy. But you know,
Okay.
I'm trying to make the point that like $10 on Amazon for paper towels or something is way less important to you from a purchasing standpoint than $10 a month for a music subscription service.
Interesting. Great. Any other last comments? Yeah, please.
Well, no, I mean, I think healthcare sells itself. I mean, it's the only.
Are you alive? Yes. Because of
Exactly.
me.
Do you want to stay that way?
You want to stay that way?
Okay, great.
All right.
But also, it's like the only industry or the
Still
only
not
thing
going
in
for the kale. Sorry. Go ahead.
By the end of this session,
You'll have me eating kale. All right.
that's my goal with oranges. But it's the only industry that, like, someone's life or someone making it to the sea the next day depends on whether or not your fax machine works. A fax machine. My brother is here and he's 15. Do you know what a fax machine is? Okay. Well, you're supposed to say no. It would
Okay.
have made my
I'm going to
point.
give him a rotary. I'm going to give you a rotary phone. Let's see if you figure that one out.
So, I mean, like, we're using such antiquated technology for what matters the most, and I feel like it's ripe for disruption. And if you don't want a piece of that, I don't know, you're not the investor I want.
But I like my fax machine. I mean,
You can keep it in like a museum.
Okay, I can keep it
But
in a
it shouldn't
museum,
be in
okay.
the hospital.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't like it in my hospital. So, awesome. So we've each gotten a vision area. I'm going to change the question a little bit. What's coming up in the next 10 years? What's really excited you about your area or field that you think, wow, this is really going to change our lives? And don't say orange flavored kale. Okay.
Well, I think a couple of things that we're really excited at Lux, just in trends on the margin. One is around really understanding the connection between our gut and our brain, and what does that mean for pathways and connections. And the better way to think about it is like you have the whole butterflies in your stomach, the gut feeling is actually true. There is a connection, and science has proven that there is a connection. But what does it really mean? And when you stimulate certain areas of your gut, what impact does it do on your brain? So you can think about that for therapeutics, for moderation or depression, or a bunch of things that are unknown, and the brain continues to be the biggest frontier of all and the biggest unknown that we have. And another one that we're really interested in now that really the cost of doing genetic sampling and understanding our DNA has come down. Like, what are these important we call internally superhumans, for lack of a better word, like these people that have genetic traits that make them different than anyone else, and what can we learn from them about bigger populations, and can that inform different cures or different ways?
Genetically specific
Yes.
medicines and things like
Yes.
that. Yeah, that'd be great for me because definitely I'm divergent a few places. So, awesome.
So I'm really excited about the idea of bringing healthcare into the home, and not just telemedicine. I think all of the devices we're wearing today, they have sensors. Your house is now a smart home, so your Alexa can remind you to eat your kale. You can, iPhone. I'm not a big Apple fan, but one thing they are trying to win me over
Isn't
with.
that an Apple Watch?
It's not. It's a Fitbit Versa.
Okay.
Check that out.
Oh, damn.
I got slammed. Okay.
Right.
I withdraw my comments.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that they're trying to win me over by implementing these awesome healthcare features. I mean, you have an ECG reader on the new version. They have a slip and fall detection for your elderly parents who don't want that, like, that little button that you see, oh, I've fallen and I can't get it. That's not cool. And grandmas like want to be cool nowadays, so they can wear their iPhone watch and their Apple Watch and still have that same functionality. But at the same time, it's like, how can we use the tools we already have to make healthier environments for people? So instead of going back to the hospital after you had surgery to detect sepsis, like, we've just invested in a company that can detect that at home, and you don't have to go back to the doctor. And if they detect it, they can issue like a prescription for $5 antibiotics. So really using the tools we already have to make healthcare better and cheaper.
I think there's some great software-hardware combinations that'll work with you there too.
Let's talk.
How about you? Tell us about open source or infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll lay off open source for now, but I think in terms of looking forward, like the next 7 to 10 years, we at Madrona have a thesis called Cloud plus AI.
Okay.
And the reasoning behind that is, finally we have quote unquote infinite compute and storage thanks to cloud at reasonable prices. And then we have, the data, like, pretty much, we are building telemetry into every software system, every device to collect data. And finally, the third piece, which is the ML techniques and algorithms, all are getting robust and mature enough, so you can actually do something useful with those. So if you combine those three pieces, I think, a lot of the problems or the solutions that are in my area are going to just get disrupted, reimagined, and we're actually trying to kind of find opportunities where we see those three things coming together to do that. So yeah, that's probably the next 10 years for us.
Great, great. All right, I'm going to go to Slido, and I'm going to start picking some of the questions here, and let's see how we do. You have a really annoying moderate. No, skipping that one. Amazon just announced a dizzying array of Alexis-enabled devices. What does this mean for the smart home? Where is this going, and how can startups benefit?
I guess that's directed at me.
Well, I think the first one was for me, but okay.
It's interesting. I think there are two prongs of sort of interesting threads to pull on. One is Amazon has very different incentives than many other companies when it comes to hardware. As a self-proclaimed dork who takes apart pretty much every product that I interact with, the Alexa products that I've played with are surprisingly expensive, and they actually don't really make money on any of those hardware products. In fact, I think many of them they're probably losing money on, because they really just don't care. Their goal is to spread this voice across as many things as possible, and Amazon has the incredible ability to operate on 100 threads at once at full horsepower, and that is a powerful thing when you're a large tech company. I think we're seeing very similar things from FAP or whatever the acronym is now with Facebook and Apple and Amazon, all these guys. I think the problematic thread is small companies have difficulty competing in certain dimensions when it comes to
how does a startup compete with that, right? I mean, that's a steamroller coming down the road here.
It is hard. You have to you can't compete at the same game. You will lose. So you have to come at it sort of off axis and try to figure out a different feature set, a different way to attract customers, a different brand, a different something that consumers resonate over Amazon for some reason.
Can you give us an example of that? How are you going to come at it at a different angle?
Oof,
For us, it's about trust.
Save. She saved you.
No,
There we go. That's a save.
No, I think that the thing right now with the big companies, especially Facebook, and they have so much of our information, and there's just been leak after leak after leak, and especially with your healthcare data.
You think privacy would be maybe to come at
privacy
it?
is a huge thing. Someone was up here was like, we shouldn't just throw blockchain on everything because you actually want to trust people and not just throw blockchain on.
Right. Bonnie's comment.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's so true, and so where we see our companies competing,
I think that was an excellent save for Ben. I think he owes you a drink for that.
I will take a kale salad
with orange juice.
Right.
But no, I think that's where, for us, our companies compete, is that people want to know that if you're taking care of their parents, they know, they can reach someone, they know you're not a huge company, and they know you're going to keep your data
Trust,
secure.
that personal touch. As we go to bigger and bigger, we're losing that personal touch. Yeah. So it's not only that you have the hardware and the software, but the personal touch drives you to make that selection. Okay. Any other?
No, I totally agree. I think a big trend that we're seeing right now is combination of trust and transparency, and that's where the bigger companies cannot outcompete you. One, because I think their processes and their data, they weren't built to actually, they can't even understand what's going on. Right, they can't even understand what's going on and what's the extent of it. And then the other one too is Amazon will never outcompete you in experience. And a lot of brand building is about creating a connection with the consumer and making people feel something and have an experience. If you know what you want and you search, nothing will ever be as convenient and as quick and as price competitive as Amazon. But if you're looking for more, if you're looking to be inspired, if you're looking to have fun, if you're looking to discover, that's not their game.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of human nature where a mass-produced, low-cost product just won't meet, right? Because we want to feel attached, we want to identify with the brand, we want to identify with the company, right? And so there is a limitation to being big, that you really can't do that well. Okay. Let's go.
I think in the software world, right, it's slightly different, but similar, which is I think what we see is a company's data, for example, might reside in different systems of record, right? There might be HR data, there might be customer data, there might be manufacturing, whatever data, operational data, finance data. I think there's some real interesting opportunities for a startup to go and get the data from different silos, unique extract insights from them and build a sustainable moat around that by going across customers.
Got it. Achieving all the data across from multiple sources to achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, there's some examples right now, like we have investments in companies that are doing like contract management, right, or helping procurement companies. They're collecting data from different silos, and each of those, if you call them systems of record, are sold by other incumbent companies. But none of them
Don't
has
say the word
view.
blockchain. Okay.
I won't go there. I'm not qualified enough. But I think that's what I think, there are some unique opportunities for startups to go and build some
Great.
businesses.
So we are out of time. So we're going to go ahead and do a wrap up first. No, I have 5 minutes left. Ooh.
can sing a
Apparently I
song.
can't learn time either.
away,
So,
people.
all right. Well, let me grab. Hang on. Let me get to the slide. Oh, I got a few more. 1 second. So, and this is what happens when you don't know how to use your hardware very well. And look, I have the control panel. Okay, let's try this one more time here. If not, I'll just use one of my own. Okay. What does a great healthcare investment look like?
So I think like any investment, you want a large market. For us, it is having a way that the product is reimbursable, because a big thing for us is having low-income patients being able to access that product. So our companies build products that are premium in nature, so they are like, at that Amazon price point, but they are reimbursable by all the major insurers. And so that's one thing that we look for. The other thing is, of course, like I think any products or software, building the product with the customer in mind. So we won't even invest until the folks have gone through efficacy trials and have gotten feedback from the patients about the patient experience.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? Okay. Well, then let me offer this. So we have just a few more minutes. So if a new VC is coming into this field, what might you tell them? What advice might you give them? Maybe just 1 or 2 key things.
I would probably say 3 things. One is make sure you talk to enough people on the buy side, like people who are actually going to buy these products. So a lot of CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, VP of engineering, director of whatever. So you need to make sure the companies that you're going to invest in, who they are selling to, you have their perspective. So that's one. Number 2 is like, I think it's really important, at least in my view, to be thematic. And I didn't say thesis-oriented because that boxes you're thinking in, then you're going to miss the outliers. But have some theme in your mind, like where the world is headed. Otherwise, you will be just chasing deals, not leading those.
Chasing shinies.
Chasing, yeah. So I think, like one of my VC mentors tells me, like 5% of the VCs actually lead the trend, the other 95% follow. And you want to be the 5% because that's where you make money. So that's number 2.
Yeah, I think we had that in an earlier presentation, right? Unpopular deals that you invest in, the 10x from earlier today.
And the third thing, so I have a great mentor who was the founder CEO of 3Com and a much older gentleman. He keeps telling me, Sudip, in your business, it's very easy to be busy. So I think I actually take that too hard. And where, for the first couple of years in my career, I definitely took a lot more, I had a lot more meetings and conversations, but I tried to be very respectful of my time as well as the other person's time and not just, be busy out there.
So being lazy has advantages.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm there for that.
Right.
Well, so for healthcare, I feel like it's essential to get out and know what the healthcare ecosystem looks like. Unfortunately or fortunately, I grew up with a couple chronic health diseases, so I was in and out of the healthcare system, and so got my informal healthcare VC training that way.
You were trained at an early age for investing in the problem.
Exactly, that's what I like to say.
Every disadvantage has an advantage.
There you go. So if you weren't as lucky as I was, definitely go out into the hospital and the healthcare system and see what it's like on the patient side if you've been lucky enough to never have to go through an emergency room. And then secondly, talk to patients. I feel like you want to know what the patient experience is like, because that is who you're creating a product for in the end. Most oftentimes in the healthcare space, the patient is the end user. And then lastly, eat your veggies so that you're around to invest in really awesome companies.
Okay.
I think for frontier investing, number 1 is be curious, and be curious at the fringe. What are the interesting people thinking about, what they're spending their weekends on, because that's going to be a lead indicator of interesting things to come. You don't have to be a full expert, but you need to know who the experts are and what are the important questions to ask. Because when you don't know what's possible, what's not possible, it's very murky to sort of navigate. So number one, like, how do you figure out the temperature and who you get to validate those things?
Know who to call.
Know who to call.
I used to say, have a good Rolodex, but I don't think anybody here knows what a Rolodex is anymore.
Yeah, and I think, also stay close to your companies because they're going to be facing challenges and they're going to be, oh, I wish I had this, or now that I can do this, the next thing is possible. So they're going to be crumbs for, we always say that the next thing is at the edge of the thing we're investing in right now. So follow those breadcrumbs.
Follow the breadcrumbs. All right.
I think there's unfortunately a lot of discouragement in the startup community from certain types of people, especially around some of the topics that we focus on, which are a little bit less the core or social media things or whatever. And like in my case, there's a phrase that I hear all the time, which is hardware is hard. That's why they named it hardware, which is not why they named it hardware. and surprising, I know. Yeah.
But it's a hell of a moat, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely advantages to being challenging, but I would argue that everything that is of value is challenging. And I don't think
solving the hard problems is
totally
where the value.
I think every startup is a challenging thing to do. If you want to do something easy, do not start a company. I don't think you can talk.
Be a VC? Is that no? I'm just kidding.
No, but I think there are many things which people view as quote unquote easy, which the founders of those companies, the people that work there, would never in a million years call whatever starting Airbnb or starting Uber or whatever that you think of like as easy because it's software as being easy. They're fighting a million different battles.
It's just another type of fight.
Exactly, and so I think we're wired to not judge the battles that we know about as the same as the battles that we don't. And I think part of the discipline I've tried to learn is I don't know a lot of things about different areas, but I know one thing really well, and I can help encourage people to get through those things at the best of my ability. And I think that's a really important tool for an investor to do well.
All right. Awesome. Well, this time we really are out of time, and it was correctly accounted for by the staff here, but don't pay attention to me. So first, I'd like to thank all of you. It was excellent. I had a great time having the conversation, and I learned a lot, not just about kale, but also about some hardware and some how to make money on open source. So I'd like to thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to thank you as well for listening to us. Thank you so much.